Hello and welcome to this webinar, Coaching Skills for Fearless Cultures. These webinars are designed to extend your learning and to support you in implementing a coaching approach into your leadership style. And of course, what we're doing here in a broad sense is thinking fearless leadership. And fearless leadership builds fearless cultures. And how we're doing that at the individual level is by introducing coaching approaches into the way we go about every day. So today's plan, we're going to explode 5 myths of leadership. We're going to talk about coaching versus mentoring. What is coaching? What's mentoring? And when do we choose which? Let's implement coaching on the go. Coaching in those corridor conversations, just making the most of those little opportunities you get to interact with people. And then on the other end of the spectrum, coaching in a more formal context. And how do we go about doing that? So remembering that one of the core competencies of coaching of the coaching leader is being really clear on your purpose. What's the outcome of the conversation? So I'm being quite overt with you here. My purpose for this webinar is to boost your confidence to coach. So that's guiding the direction that I'm taking us on for this webinar. So 5 myths about leadership. Let's just explode some of these myths. These are things that I hear and I think, no, that's not leadership. And the first one is that leaders must have the answers. And this is an especially important one for new leaders. So for someone who's been within the team and then has been promoted to lead the team, there's often a real sense that you need to have all the answers. But actually, it's okay to not have all the answers. No one expects that you're going to have the answers yourself. In fact, your team want to be involved in creating the answers. Leaders who coach are curious and they draw out wisdom and ideas from the team. And in doing that, they're empowering others to contribute. And this is what results in a much more of a shared accountability towards the outcome. The second myth is that technical expertise matters. And actually, your technical expertise is secondary. Your technical expertise is often what gets you promoted. You might be an excellent lawyer, an excellent nurse, and that gets you leading the legal team or the nursing division. But once you get into that leadership role, this is where the rules of the game change. As a leader, your success comes from your team's success and not from what you personally know. Your technical expertise is important, absolutely. It's necessary, but this is a new game. It's your leadership expertise now that matters. Your team needs ownership of the answers, and they're more likely to own the answers if they've been part of developing the solution. So don't just give them the answers. Coach your team to be part of the solution. The third myth is that people don't want negative feedback, that people can't handle negative feedback. Actually, people want feedback. People want the bad news that you're uncomfortable to give them. And research has found that people want corrective action more than praise, as long as it's given in a constructive manner. And there was one survey that showed that 72% of people said their performance would improve if their manager provided corrective feedback. So improve performance, offer feedback. And the fourth myth is that good leaders provide clear directions. And actually, questions trump directions. Now, when you give directions, then we might be engaging the person's rational brain. But that's not necessarily going to help with recall, and it's not going to help with ownership. Asking questions rather than giving directions, it's more likely to lead to self-discovery and to insight. Now, solving a puzzle is inherently rewarding for the brain. So engaging the emotional brain. And that increases the chance that people are going to remember and they're going to actually apply the learning that we're talking about. So stop telling, start asking. You might remember what we talked about in the workshop, that question marks are the sexiest punctuation. And the fifth myth is that working hard is what counts. You know, my parents used to talk about the Protestant work ethic, and the idea that the more we worked, the more we would be rewarded. And actually, in a leadership sense, sometimes working less is actually working more. When you as a leader have that need to control people and to control the situation, it's just exhausting. Now, there might be a queue of people outside your office door and they're looking for you to provide the answers. And that might be good for your ego, but it's not good for your team and it's not good for your health. Now, a coaching approach helps you work less and empower more. I hope you can see from that there's 5 myths about leadership, and a coaching approach supports us exploding each one of those and working in a more effective way. I'm quite often asked, you know, what's coaching? What's mentoring? What's the difference between the two? And even when people know the difference between the two, when do I coach and when do I mentor? So what is coaching? It's predominantly, if there's a one word, it's asking. It's asking questions to bring about insight. It's asking questions to develop a sense of self-awareness. It's asking questions to help people get really clear on what's going on around them, and then to develop options to respond. And finally, to choose of those options that I've created, of the insight that I now have, of that new sense of motivation and understanding of my motivations and the situation around me, helping them to make then a final choice and a commitment. And if there was a word explanation of mentoring, it's about telling. You're telling somebody something. You're passing on new knowledge directly as a knowledge transfer, something you know that you're transferring to the other person. So how do you choose what hat to wear? Well, I'd go back here to that concept that I shared with you of situational leadership. You need to be the leader that the people, the situation, and the task need in that moment. So is coaching the best approach, or is it mentoring? Or perhaps it's neither. Perhaps in that specific instance, it might be directing or some other sort of leadership approach. Now, it's easy to do what you've always done. And the key here is to think first. Think before you tell. Maybe you remember back to the interview with Phil Golding. And if you haven't heard that, I do encourage you to go back and listen to that webinar, because Phil gives some really great insights into his journey to build coaching skills. And Phil talks about how he decides when he coaches or when he provides some other sort of support. And one of the things that I really liked about what Phil said was his commitment to implementing coaching techniques into his daily management practices, how he tried them out just to see how they would go, and found that they were working and kept doing it. So coaching on the go, this is about introducing a coaching approach into just those little conversations that happen through the day. You know, the corridor conversations. It might be as you're walking into a meeting with somebody. It might be you meet someone in the lunchroom, or you just having a conversation with them while you're waiting for a lift. This isn't a formal coaching conversation. It's just the opportunity to introduce a coaching approach into the way you lead. So what five tips here. And the first one is to ask yourself, what do you need to believe? What do you need to believe about yourself or about a coaching approach so that you're okay to begin? You know, do you need to believe that it's okay to not have the answers? Do you need to believe that it's okay to step forward with a question? Do you need to believe that a coaching approach could work for you? What do you need to believe so that you're okay to begin? Now, stop already on the advice. Our default response is so often to provide the answers, to fix the situation. And the most important thing, I think, here is just stop. Stop on the advice. Make a conscious decision whether advice here is the best approach. So we've stopped on the advice and we're ready to ask a question. A really useful approach is just to ask them, what have you already tried? And once you're clear on what they've tried, because perhaps that was what you might have gone straight in and suggested, then ask them, what do you think you're going to try next? What do you think you could do next? And then having heard that, and only then, offer a suggestion. If you've got an idea that you think is going to be more effective, and it needs to be significantly more effective than the options that they've tried, then offer it. But it's a suggestion. Okay, so you've already tried this, and you're thinking about these things. Have you thought about this? Or have you thought about the implications of those suggestions that you just made? And what would happen if this were to happen next? So start with what they've already tried, and then what they think they're going to try next. Because them implementing something that they're fully committed to that might be an 80% solution will be far more effective in the long run than committing 50% or even less to an 100% solution that you might offer. So the fourth tip, be comfortable with the silence. The silence is their thinking time, and avoid the temptation to fill in that space. It's not an uncomfortable silence. If you ask somebody a question and they're silent, it's usually a good sign. It's because they're thinking. So get comfortable with the silence. Remember back to the 80-20 rule. If you're speaking more than 20%, then you're probably not coaching. You should be listening 80% and speaking 20%. And the fifth tip, the coaching on the go, is to just commit to getting started. And get started by just using 1 or 2 coaching questions. Just bring 1 or 2 coaching questions into your corridor conversations and notice the response you get. And how did that work? Get curious about it. What's working well? What do you need to tweak? Just get started. And if there was a 6th tip, because I did say there was 5, but if there was a 6th tip, it would be keep going. Take Phil's advice, just make it happen and reap the benefits. So to formal coaching now, that when you actually have an intention to sit down with someone and have a coaching conversation. So how do we prepare for that? And yes, the coaching model is important, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The most important thing, as I'm sure you'll remember me saying, is your state, the energy that you bring to the conversation. Your state matters in this coaching conversation. And we talked about the core competencies for the coaching leader. And there's 12 of them there, so that's a lot to think about. We covered 7 of them in the program. Let's not try and think about all of them. Just choose one of them, just one to focus on. Improve your strength and your skills and your comfort just in that competency, and then move on to another. Don't try and spread your energy right across this. So the ones that we talk about that were the key ones are these 7 here. So which one is most important for you? Which one's the biggest challenge? Is it about being curious? Is it about being open to people's ideas, to approaches, to styles, to their beliefs, rather than sitting in judgment on them? Perhaps for you it's courage. Perhaps it's the courage to commit, to open yourself to people and to be vulnerable, to open yourself and have the courage to hear their stories, and to make that commitment. Perhaps it's the questions that are biggest challenge for you. So just focus on that sexy punctuation. Let's get more questions into your conversations. Or is it compassion? What's the energy that you bring into the conversation? How do you move towards real understanding of the other person? Or perhaps it's listening. Perhaps it's how you show up as a listener in the conversation. That's the core competency for you to focus on. Or is it that focus and awareness, making the distinction between the behaviour you see and the intention behind that behaviour? So choose one of these and focus on that. Build your confidence, build your strength, and then let it go and move on to another one. That's a fairly general tip, I know. And when I was thinking about what would be my most important advice, my strongest advice for starting formal coaching conversations? It so depends on where you are, which is why I say your state matters. Choose the core competency that you need first to build and focus on that one. And then we use the model, and we use the GROW model. So take your little quick reference cards with you into these conversations. It's okay to have that as a guide. We're going into the conversation, what's the goal? What is it that they want to achieve? And the more clarity we gain at the start about what's the purpose of this conversation, then the more likely we are to get to a useful outcome. Being clear on the goal then help them to understand what's going on here, what's their reality, what's the implications of this behaviour for them and for others, or for this challenge for them and for others, how do other people see it, what's going on in the environment. And this is where we might then need to go back and refine the goal. Once you've got a greater understanding of what's going on, you might want to go back to the goal and refine that, or perhaps that's all still in full alignment. Now, understanding what the reality is then allows us to move into options. Given that's the goal we want to achieve and this is the environment that we're operating in, how could we resolve this? What are the possibilities here? Now, this is where you spend most of the time in your conversation, looking at options. It's very easy for us as smart, intelligent leaders to jump in and give them the solution. And of course, that's not coaching. It's also very easy when they come up with a solution, it's easy for them to say, well, that's obviously the answer, let's commit, let's move on. And yet it might not be the best response. So make sure you spend enough time here and generate multiple options. And can you offer suggestions? Yes, of course you can. And you invite them, you ask permission to give your suggestions, and only after they have truly exhausted their own ideas. So it might be simply a question of, okay, you've come up with some great suggestions here. Would you like me to give you a couple of ideas of things that I've seen work with other people? Now, I remember a situation like this that I experienced. Would it be useful if I shared with you how I worked through this? So that way it's yet another option for them to consider. And once we're clear on the options, then we can wrap up the conversation. Okay, so that's all the things you could do. If this is the goal that we want and this is the environment that we're working in, what will you do? Getting that commitment and making sure that we've got a sufficiently tight agreement there on an outcome. And actions, so that you can follow them up if that's appropriate in this context. What support do they need from you? What accountability structure is there? What time frame? And that takes us right through the GROW model. If you start using this in a formal sense, you'll very quickly find that it's a very nice flow. And you can bring that then into your informal conversations as well. From your simple corridor conversations that we were talking about earlier, right through to conducting a full meeting or a debrief with a client. You could follow this sort of a framework. As I said, be confident, use it, take it with you. Take the quick reference chart with you, and if you don't want to do that, just put a little diagram or a little sticky note somewhere where you can see it, just to remind you until you get a little bit more confident in using it, how we move around the GROW model. So this is a skill. Coaching's a skill, and we all need to start somewhere with a skill. When we learn a physical skill, like rollerblading, for example, we don't expect to be able to get it right immediately. And when we're being realistic, we don't expect to get coaching right immediately either. So get started, start learning, and see how it goes. So it's time to get out of your comfort zone, and into the learning zone. And I look forward to sharing with you your coaching adventures. Good luck and enjoy.